How do you build systems with AI? And I don't mean how do you write code with AI. I mean, how do you write code that will use AI as part of its processing? And is that a good idea? I mean, when is it a good idea? When is it a bad idea? I think the industry is very much in the exploration phase for all of those questions, which means we're going to see a lot of good ideas implemented badly and a lot of bad ideas implemented at great expense. I don't think anyone really has the answer yet. But I do know one company that really needs to get it right, and that's Google. Because I think for Google, AI is both a massive opportunity and an existential threat. I say it's a threat because I find myself starting a search these days with Claude or Cursor almost as much as I start searching with Google. If other people start doing that, if Google is no longer synonymous with search, that kills their ad revenue, which could kill the company as we know it. Existential threat. But AI is also a massive opportunity for them. I mean, the company was built on search, and LLMs are the best thing to happen to searching random documents since the search engine itself was invented. It's also amazing for connecting systems together in a way we couldn't before. There's probably $1 billion business just in find the questions in this document, turn them into SQL, run those queries, turn the answers into a slide deck, and share that with the head of marketing. That probably is $1 billion business. And it's now possible to build something like that. And Google have a huge opportunity to connect those systems together with LLMs if they can answer the question I started with. How do you build systems that use AI as part of their processing pipeline? Well, they have one answer, and they've just open sourced it. So joining me this week to discuss it is Christina Lin of Google. And we're going to talk about the effect of AI on Google, about Agent Development Kit, which is their Python toolkit for building agentic development pipelines, and about A2A, which is their answer to MCP and their attempt to get agents talking to each other directly. This stack could replace LangChain and MCP and several other answers to this question. Heaven knows Google kind of need it to. They are motivated to try. So let's find out what it involves and what kind of systems we could build with it. I'm your host, Chris Jenkins. This is Developer Voices, and today's voice is Christina Lin. My guest today is Christina Lin. Christina, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Chris.
You're back. It's very cool you're back. You're one of the early guests working for a different company.
I know.
Now
things has changed a lot.
Now you're at Google, right?
Yes.
Oh. What's it like being in the giant megacorp?
I think it's very challenging, and things are moving a lot faster because I think it's just because of AI generally. And there's a lot more folks I can talk to. The community is very vibrant here. So yeah, love everything here.
Okay, well, as a official, non-official spokesperson for Google, as official spokesperson for a tiny cog in the giant Google empire.
Yes.
I want to get your broad perspective before we dig into the technology, right? Because I look at Google and I wonder what they're doing. Because let me frame it this way. Google have always had this, mission to organize the world's data. That was how they used to frame it. Right? And I could see AI as being a fantastic opportunity for a company that wanted to organize vast amounts of data, the world's unstructured data, right? I can also see AI being a massive threat to Google, because we all know that Google's main business model is advertising on search. And I think AI is changing the way people search for things. So it's an opportunity. It could also be an existential threat. Where on the inside, where do you see AI affecting the thrust of the company?
So AI has been changing Google from top to bottom, right? I mean, not just the owned search, but also how we operate on things and how we kind of design our products and all this kind of things, right? So I think on top of, if you think about how we develop software today in Google, 25% of our code has been generated by AI. So in that terms, we are being a lot more efficient on getting the software out, getting something, a product that will be faster to our developers or for our users. At the same time, I don't think people are moving away from search. It's just the way that they see search is different. They tend to kind of go through every single one of the results. Now they just want to see the summaries of these search results. So Google has been changing our way of representing the search results. I don't know if you've been using Google search recently. You see this summary of search on the very top of your search results. That's something that we're constantly evolving, and we're not just removing all the things that we had before, because if you want to dive into the details, you can still do that. And to be honest with you, I feel like Google has been in AI for way ahead of everybody else. We were there doing Google research. Google DeepMind has been doing AI, and we are the first company that does, that claims, that does all the AI compliances, policies ahead of everybody else. So I think Google is very bold on getting to innovation on AIs, but also trying to be responsible, right? So that's kind of my vision. I think that's what kind of my view of what Google's been doing on the AI space.
Yeah. But there must be some degree of worry in there too. It can't all be positive, because for 10, 20 years, every time I wanted to know something, I'd go to Google and search for it. And now maybe a third, maybe a half of my queries go through something like Claude.
Right. I mean,
that's a big change.
There is going to be a big change, but I think it's a good change, but nothing is good. There's going to be threats, right? So there's going to be competitions coming up. So I think Google is ready for the competition. Not sure if we'll win. I'm not sure. I'm not a fortune teller. So I don't know what the future will look like. But from what I see and what Google offers today, I think it's a very strong background and foundation to build things on top of it. So I think there's still a long way ahead of time, because we're not just talking about, text search. We're also thinking about multimodality search. We're also thinking about, searching a film, searching a podcast, right? From what we're talking about today. So how do we make all this searchable and efficient? I don't think other competitors are there yet, but Google is way ahead of everybody else in terms of multimodalities, right? So I think there are different things you have to take in considerations, and how we are going to interact with the computer is very different from what we're going to see today. Today is mainly text-based, but if you've seen the recent release from Deep Search or our DeepMind, what they've been doing is they're doing this whole real-time virtual realities. So how do you know you're not going to be communicating with your computers with your gestures, with your voices, or with your movement? There are different things that the computer can detect. So it's still a long way to go. So we'll see.
We are closer than ever to that Star Trek computer that talks to you and maybe projects a holodeck to describe what you're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
it's speeding up. I would say now it's ever evolving, and things are moving at faster speed.
Okay, well, you must be in a fun place. We need to get into exactly what you're doing and how it can enable us to have some of that fun too, right?
I know. Well, one step at a time. We'll have to get there somewhere, but we want to start somewhere.
So one of the things you're working on is an agent developer toolkit. Agent Developer Kit.
Yes.
Got to get that acronym right, or otherwise it becomes ADT, and that's busy. ADK.
Yes.
So I'm gonna get you to start off by helping me understand the structure of these things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I confess I don't quite get, and I don't think anyone quite gets yet, is why you build agent pipelines, right? I see some companies acting as though they're going to replace all their regular software processing with AI software processing, and that seems ridiculous. What's a good case for building an agentic pipeline? What even is that?
So if you think about how we kind of write our pipelines a year before, it's very static. It's very linear. So you put in your intent, that's your user prompt, and then you kind of send it off to an LLM, which is a model that process your request, and then it will come up with a response and then hand it back to you, right? So that was a very original pipeline and it's very static. We've seen that before, and it's been doing that forever. But now we're seeing a lot more complex use case. So there are things like, hey, what happens if I want to do multiple LLM requests? What happens if I want to do this one and then maybe jump to another one? And then how do I aggregate all this together? Things gets very complicated, right? So that's when...
Explain to me before we go on, explain to me why you want to do that. I mean, it seems like these modern models are really quite similar.
Right. I think it's because now we have one. So if you do a task, it's if you ask an LM to help you to do analyze a plan that you want to do on Saturday, that's one single task. What happens if you want to ask it to book your entire, night out plan? So then you have to trigger another request going out somewhere. And what happens if you want to go to 3 different places? So they are different things you want to do. Of course, then we get into, do I want to do that in one single LM calls? Because they are different tasks you probably want to do. And some you can do that in parallel. Sometimes you want to do that in sequence, right? Because sometimes you want to do, sometimes you want to do the planning first, and then you want to simultaneously book your stuff. And sometimes if you have choice, if you have option A, and then there's a backup plan if this one's full, and then you also have a sequential. And sometimes you want to do a loop just to make sure that you're booking, because that hotel or that specific place you want to go might be busy, so you might want constantly comes back and book your space. So there are just many different workflow that can happen. So that gets very complicated, and these can all be handled by LLMs, by the way. You don't have to do it manually, or you don't have to do it programmatically, and that's why we want to talk about all these pipelines.
Right. Yes. So they might be separate contexts going to the same model, but different instances of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I could see instantly how I'd want to have a completely separate context for running the tests on my code and not letting the other agent cheat and disable the tests.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And then sometimes we go into like multi-model designs or single model approaches, or sometimes I don't even want to use models, right? So things like that, you have to kind of figure that out. And then do I want to bring in workflow, or do I not want to bring workflow? Do I want to have LM do everything together for me, or do I want it to separate out? These are just design choices and design questions that you have to think about when you are, designing your systems.
This seems like something I could put together manually.
Yes.
But you're building a toolkit to just make that easy, right?
Exactly. Yes. And we call that an agent, mostly because things get complicated, and traditionally we kind of just have it done by an LM, that we call that a chain, right? Like LangChain was there before. LangChain was doing all the chain stuff. So that's one request coming back. That's one interaction with LMs. But the problem right now is like LM is a good brain because it has a very large thinking ability to help you process things intellectually and cognitively. You can do that. But when it comes to actually do executions, you actually have to have it to interact with outside world, right? So that sometimes we'll have to have functions or APIs to interact with, right? And that brings us up to, all right, so if I already have my LM decided to do things for me, can I have it automatically executed for me? So I want it to be autonomous, right? So that's why we want to bring in agents. So when we talk about agent development kit, we are actually developing an agent that can think for you and that can do things for you. So that's how we define an agent. We're going to help you. This framework will help you design that agent.
So the fact that it can act is what distinguishes it from just being an LLM.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay. So I have in my head this architecture, which is LLM is the big magic 8-ball of all human knowledge.
Yep.
Bunch of prompts to try and tease the right thing out of the magic 8-ball. And then the functions you've given it permission to execute.
Yes.
That's a good starting point?
Yeah. that would be something. Yeah, I think that's you're totally talking about the agent, right? So you've got the model itself, right, which is, I would always imagine that as a robot where you have the kind of the processing, the CPUs, the processing unit. That's the brain, that's the LLM, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have the agents. The robot needs to take in directions from humans. So that's user prompt, right? That was your intentions and all that kind of questions. And then the robot actually have to do execute stuff. So it's the hand or the feet, the actions that it does, right? So that's the tools, right? So these are the things that kind of what an agent does. And, like on top of that, you also have to handle a bunch of other things like memories. As your agent memorize things, right? Does it members the entire sessions of of what you talked about, or does it remember a week of information that you've given it, or does it only interact with you once? Just depending on your designs and all that kind of stuff, right? So all that needs to be built into the agent itself.
So as we dive into the actual kit, I think the first question is this a library or is it a framework? Is it a collection of tools, or is it also an opinion about how you put them together?
Well, first of all, I think it's an opinion of how we think an agent should be put together, and that becomes a framework that you can use. So within this framework, we have libraries that makes you write agent a lot easier, right? So we do have opinion saying that an agent will have to have a model. You have to have your intent, which is your system prompt, and then you also want to have a list of tools of how you want your things to be executed. So these three are the mandatory things that you want to have in your agents. And there are other stuff that you can opt in or opt out. So it depends on what you wanted to assemble. It's very similar to how you want to assemble your robot, right? So depends on what you want, and you can just assemble them together.
Okay, let's go for a concrete example. I can think of an agent I might want to include in my personal pipeline that I don't think exists yet, which is Jujutsu, the version control system, right? I can easily find an agent that will work with Git. I now want to use a different version control system. What do I build to say, here's a sub pipeline for committing and status and all that stuff?
So what you do is you will probably have a tool that interacts with Jujitsu, right? So, or your new version control platform, right? So the intent of your agent won't change. So basically the model that you use won't change. The system prompt won't change because it's handling all the version controls and stuff like that. I am a version control agent. The user prompt just depends on what you input it. It's the tool that will change underneath the hood, right? So what you can do is you can probably have a tool that connects to your newly kind of connected version control platform. And you can also have it connect. You can also have it optional as a Jujitsu as the other one. So in your prompt, you can say, "Hey, can I commit my code into Jujitsu?" And basically, what the agent would think is like, "All right, so I'm gonna commit this piece of code into your Jujitsu repository," and then you can say, well, what happens if I want to commit it to my new version control repository? And it's going to do that. Or you can say, hey, commit to my X repository. And what the LM can do is, depending on what method or what functions you have in your tools, you might have lists of repository. So basically what the agent will do is will look for all the available repository in each version control systems and see which one it is. It will automatically pick the one and kind of commit your code to the right system. So it's just how you can do that.
So do I write some Python that says, here's a Python function that looks for dot directories to figure out which kind of version control I'm using. Here's a function that does Jujutsu status and returns that as JSON.
Actually, you don't have to do that. So basically what you need to do, you just have to have a list of tools that that the agent will have access to. A couple of things that you probably need is list of repositories. How do I commit it? And how do I interact with it? So basically all this tool will provide a name and what it does, right? So it's like a list of, think about it as a toolbox, right? So like you have your Jujitsu toolbox and you have your other version control toolbox. And these are all the tools that's available here. So your agent will be very smart enough to go back and look into the toolbox, and it will see all these available tools, right? And it's going to see, all right, for me, I probably want to use this particular tool to see which repositories are available in my version control system. So I'm going to use this tool. And after that,
Yep.
it's going to think about, all right, so if I want to do commit, should I use this one and then commit it? So it's very important that you kind of specify in your system prompt specifying to your agent saying that you are a version control agent. It is your job to figure out how to use these tools to help users. And one of the tools you can probably you probably want to, or you want to make sure you're getting the list right in the right into the right system. And if they are similar names, make sure you check with the user which system they want to commit it to. So things like that needs to be clear in your system prompt. The more clear it is, the better your agent performs.
Okay, so there are two parts of this I need to clarify if I want to be able to use this. One is, I know most LLMs are probably trained up to about 2024, but not much further, right, these days.
Yes.
So I'm going to write a prompt to say, you're a version control system. And it probably knows what that means because they were ubiquitous in 2024. Then I don't expect it's going to know a new system like Jiu-Jitsu. So do I then say, and here's the manual for Jiu-Jitsu? Or here's where you find the manual to understand what it means to be a version control system for that specific tool.
So basically, your tool needs to define what it is, right? The tool itself will have to have some kind of definitions of what it does and what it is. So it will know ahead of the time. So basically what it will do is we'll go to these tooling boxes and search for their names and what they do. So if you are a better designer of the tools, you'll probably give a better name of your tool. So the LM would know the intent, right? So sometimes people don't do that. So the LM will have a hard time defining that. So it all depending on how you design your tools and how you provide those information to your tools. And I think that's a good kind of a segue coming into MCP server. I'm not sure MCP, because MCP is a protocol that defines how the LLM talks to tools. And with this MCP protocol, it allows you to better define the intent and better define what the tools are. So it will allow your LM to be better. It will allow your LM to discover the tools a little bit better compared to a normal function calls that you would do, right? So before the MCP server came out, we do something called function calling. So basically what it does is that you provide a bunch of functions ahead of time for LLMs, and LLM's going to guess the intent of your users and figure out what function it needs to call. And then you have to manually do all the runnables and executable for your calls. Like in Python, you have to make it runnable and then execute your functions. But now all you have to do is just letting all your LM knows where they are. It's going to pick up all the information and decide which one to execute, and the library is going to execute it for you. So it's hiding all this complicated code for you, so you don't have to do it yourself.
So there's something going on in the LLM to say, I as a user type, please commit this code. And the LLM also has in the prompt, there's git commit available as a function. Would you like to use that tool? And the LLM says, okay, the next step is to invoke that tool.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It will be like invoke this tool, and this tool will need specific parameters, right? Because sometimes you need to kind of feed in parameters. So what the LM will do is we'll look at your information, it will look at your prompt and see, how do I extract all the parameters from all the information I have, right? So it's going to say, all right, so 90% of the time you should call this tool, and this tool will require these parameters. I'm going to assemble all that for you and then put it into the libraries. The library is going to execute the tools plus the parameters you pass in. Say if you're committing this files, it's going to say, all right, this is the file names that I'm going to commit, and this is the commit message, and this is the user. So basically, you go pass in all that and then just do that for you.
So my job to build an agent then is to find some interesting functions and annotate them for the LLM's sake.
Well, yes, you can annotate them. They are default tools that came with the ADK itself, and they are you can integrate with MCP server. So MCP will give you a list of tools.
Oh, so someone else might have already annotated their functions for my
Exactly.
sake.
Yes.
Right. And I do this in Python, is it ADK?
So ADK, the most mature, the most mature library is in Python, but we do have Java as well as JavaScript, and Golang is coming up.
It doesn't surprise me that those are the three languages. I would have thought coming out of Google, Go would have been first. No, Python is the language of AI at the moment.
Exactly.
I would have thought they go Python, Go, Java.
Well, I mean, we have a very large Java user base, so Java was one of the early ones.
Okay, but you've definitely got the resources to tackle all three.
Definitely. Well, you'll be surprised. I think we need to find a Golang expert to also know AI and do that kind of stuff as well. So
you've heard about this job posting here first, folks. Okay. So let's stick with Python. I'm writing a Python thing that says, here's an MCP server with annotated functions, or here are the functions I annotated. I define which model we're using.
Yes.
Is this open source? Can I run this against like Ollama models running on my computer? Or do I have to use Google's cloud stuff?
Oh, you can definitely use any models that you want. I've used it with Gemma. So Gemma, again, it's a Google model, but it's an open source model. I ran it on my own laptop on Ollama as well. So it all works as long as it supports like normal, like it also supports OpenAI standard as well. So any other models that you think you can want to use, it's usable.
Okay, so tools, choose my LLM. Do you have any tips on how to set the system prompt? Because that seems like a dark art to me.
It is. I'm still mastering that dark art as well. I think it's the hardest part of building an agent is getting the system prompt right.
Yeah.
So basically,
it seems like
it's. I think there is a trick that you probably want to give a example output if you can, so that your agent will have an idea of how it should provide the information back. Sometimes you want to have a structured output. Sometimes you want to have a natural language output. And what does the output looks like? I think having that example for your LLM would be a lot easier for it to kind of figure out exactly what you want from as a returned response standpoint. I think it'll be easier.
Okay. So let's go back to your booking Friday night out example. I need to choose a decent LLM. I need to give it an example of what I consider to be fun on a Friday night.
Yes.
I need to give it access to various booking APIs for restaurants and cinemas and stuff. And then I need to design some kind of fun evaluation agent.
Yes, like depends on what your recreation is. So what I did an example, I did a fun night out demo like a couple months ago. The way I did it is I use Google Grounding. So I don't know if you're familiar with Google Grounding, Google Search, all those kind of stuff, but it can help you to retrieve the latest information on the internet. So I'm not getting a Friday night out kind of plan like that's a year old, because year-old information is too old for me. I want something that's new.
As it hallucinates the idea of a Friday night in the abstract.
Exactly. And I don't want to see a movie that's like a year old, right? I want to see something that's like the most recent. I want to go to the most hippest, the most popular restaurant in the area, right? So I would probably, that's why I would use grounding sometimes to kind of help me. And it's one of the built-in tools coming from the ADK itself. So I would just add it as part of my plan. Hey, can you figure out in Boston area, this is where I live, what is the best place to go if I like anime, if I enjoyed watching movies, or if I want to go to a very nice Japanese restaurants, how do I do that? And I can kind of put it into my prompt, and it will help me get the latest and greatest information from that.
So that description just sounded like searching for running a Google search, right? What is grounding that isn't just search?
Well, I mean, if you do a normal LM search, you're gonna just search on the things that it was trained on. So it was not the best thing, right? So having that extra information on, checking out the latest, web results. And the difference between grounding and the normal LLM search is the way that it will refer back to the resource, the original content. So if you look like deep enough into the weeds and the code itself, the returned format is very different. So normally when you do a request and response from LLM, you get a response and it's text-based basically. But if you do a grounding, what you're going to get is you're going to get an extra metadata of things. You're going to get a bunch of search results. You're going to get a chunk of what we call a search chunks, where it gives you all the original places of where it gets the information from. So you can do a fact check. And it's going to also give you a sentences on where it gets the specific sentence. Say, if you like the movie, it's going to say, okay, this specific movie was very popular in the past 3 years. It's going to get that specific sentence for you, so you know where to refer it back. So there is evidence of how it's pulling the data. So there's less hallucination, just like what you said, and it's more. You can kind of figure out like where the data is coming from.
So its response is kind of annotated with citations.
Exactly.
The way you'd expect a paper to be.
Yes.
Is there a step at the end where it then goes and independently double checks those citations?
It doesn't independently go and double check, but it will do a summary of all the things it searched for you. So because it's building on top of that, whatever I search on the internet it's an evidence piece of data, right? So it gets all that, summarize it, and then put it all back to you.
Okay. So how complex do these pipelines get? It seems to me that what we've discussed so far could be done with one LLM, one prompt, and a bunch of tools. But how complex can ADK get, and how complex have you seen it get?
Oh, I've seen it get very complex in some of the areas because, the problem with, you putting too much into your system prompt is that it takes longer for the LLM to process. Like what we said, the most costly thing to run an AI system is the token numbers. So the more tokens you put in, the more cost it is, right? So how do we kind of limit and it's gonna, the more token you have, the more the more like linkage it needs to do, and it takes longer for the results to come back. So there's limitations of what one request can take. So it gets to a time when the system gets really complicated. You want to start separating out different intent, like the responsibility of different agents. Say if you want to do like Friday it out, let's think about a different example, right? So if you want to book you're booking a travel, say more than a night out, right? So if you want to book your hotel, you want to book your flights. These are two separate things you want to do, right? So you probably want to isolate it that it doesn't have to search for the hotels and search for the flights and figure everything out together and all that kind of stuff. There may be a point where you want to aggregate them out together at the very end. But when it's doing the evaluations and all the cost comparings and all that kind of stuff, maybe it's easier and faster to have them split out and done in parallel and then come back to aggregate them back together at the very end. So there are different things you probably want to do for that kind of examples. And that's why you want to have separate agents to do different things. It's called separations of concerns. I think this is a very traditional software development realm where, okay, when should I break it down to microservices? When should I have a large services that does everything, right?
Yeah, the same principles still apply for regular functions, right?
I think so. I don't think you can get away from that.
Yeah, okay. So does that mean you're seeing people build up like systems of agents that are almost as complex as you would build a system of functions in traditional programming?
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of them because, again, also you want to make sure that they're deploying in different places. How are they going to scale up? And which sometimes a particular model is better for certain tasks, right? Because sometimes if I want to have something specifically for image processing for my specific agent, I want them to be, tied to a separate agent and different model to actually do the process, right? So these are different things that makes people to make separate these things out, and I've seen them all being kind of deployed across the whole entire, even within just the same business units, they will have multiple agents doing different things.
Okay, and are you seeing mostly like the social stuff, or mostly programming, like coding related stuff, or are you getting examples of all walks of life?
Yeah, I think so. This is not specific for programming, because in programming, I would just argue that, do we want to build everything? Do you want to build agents, or do I want to build, just normal applications? So there's another discussion that we normally talk about, like when should we introduce agent and when should we just build an app, right? That's kind of the way I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
developers would kind of, you have to think about, is it cheaper to just hard code your logic like into your programs, or
Yeah.
is it much easier because it's so flexible, you want an LM to determine that for you?
Yeah, there definitely seems like coming out of Silicon Valley, there are plenty of people calling for rewriting Simple Addition as an agent.
Well, I'm a huge advocate for writing simpler addition. Like if you don't need LMs, don't use it. Like why? Why are you
Yeah,
asking it to do 1+1? That kind of question. No, you don't want to do that. You
yeah,
wanted to make it to process difficult workflow that used to need a human to do that. That's why you want to start into kind of introduce this agent into the process. If you can already do that with programs, do it with programs, right? There are things that
okay,
you probably want to do, like if you want to do refactorings, yes, you can do refactorings, but you don't want to refactor it into an agent. You want to refactor your code with an agent. So you use an agent to help you like upgrade or update your code, but you don't necessarily want to turn your code into an agent.
yeah. We are definitely finding a new class of use cases for which this technology fits well.
Yes.
But I don't think that eliminates the old class of use cases, which would just fine as they were.
Exactly. Right now, I think the
Yeah,
problem is people likes to vibe code their code. That's the biggest problem.
yeah. Yeah, I fear that vibe coding is going to make some people, in the medium terms, and make some people miss the power of these things in the hands of an expert.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
as a person that I've been vibe coding for at least a year now, I say it feels good at the very beginning, like you feel like you can do everything. But when you start maintaining, it's when the nightmare comes, right? And I also
yeah,
find that LM is very good at happy path. So because it's an intent based programming, so you're providing your LMs like your happy path. This is how my program should work. So the program, it will generate often the happy path, the way that it should work. But when it comes to edge cases or exception case, it's often very bad at doing that. So I think sometimes I have to go back and generate all these edge cases, test cases to help making sure that like where that this is handled by my happy path application. So things like
yeah,
that
yeah.
happens a lot.
In fairness, that happens with regular programmers too, where they just code for the happy path. We're all guilty of doing that when
Exactly.
deadlines
But
crunch in.
but
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you do like vibe coding, you don't really think about that. You think the application just works, right? So and if you're new to
yeah.
the
It's just a
programs,
magic box.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, let's talk about the things that an expert programmer expects to find that maybe a vibe coder won't go looking for,
Mhm.
such as how do you debug these things?
Debugging is couple of different things you can do, right? So for ADK,
Okay.
there are multiple tools that we can help you. I think there's a very nice tool inside ADK that it's so underrated. It's called ADK Web. I don't know if you ever coded with agent. The problem is like I often have to do my own like a little test cases where I can enter my prompt and it comes back with, and then it will interact with the LM, so come back with a prompt, something that I have to write myself. But the
Hmm.
ADK web, it will create a very nice UI. It will do all the user interface for you, so you don't have to do it. So every prompt you put in, it's going to automatically, get your application started. It's going to interact with your LLMs. It's going to record all the tracing, basically the tracing. What I meant by tracing is one of the things that ADK is very good at, is observabilities. But within these tools, it's going to give you very basic tracing of how long did it take for the LM to actually run the prompt, and how long does the tool takes to actually do the prompt. And when you are going into multi-agent systems, like I have one root agent and multiple sub-agent that goes within different workflow, you can see which agent it will call, because sometimes you're not calling every single sub-agent that you have. And you can see that workflow of where everything is. And you get to see the time it takes, you get to see the flow, and you get to see the response. And within the tool, you can also do testing with it as well. So you can predefine your test case, you can predefine your test case set in order to evaluate if your program is running the way you want it to be. So it's a one big package of like testing tools that for you to develop locally. So you don't have to do that.
Give me an example of a test, though, because it's not like I can say, if I give it this prompt, I expect this text back, because the text is always slightly different every time.
Right. So
what does a test case look like?
So the test case is, so you got to define the criteria first. There's two main criteria you want to set: the tool trajectories and the response, kind of your expected response. I forgot the exact name for it, but these are the two ones, right? The tooling trajectory is the tool. Sometimes you want to do tooling calls, right? Because when we talk about agent, we talk about, it should take the hammer to do the job, right? But what happens if you pick up a different,
Right.
if you pick up a screwdriver? That's not a good tooling trajectory, right? So you want to make sure it's calling the right tool. So it's the tooling trajectory. Is it calling the right tool to do the right jobs? And second of all, is the response. Right? Is the response similar in the similar directions as what it want to be? So in ADK, we're using a algorithm called Rouge. So Rouge allows you to kind of summarize, kind of see if the two intent of the response are similar enough that so you'll get a higher score. So you can define how close, does it have to be exactly the same, or does it have to be, the similar way? And I'm okay with that, because with natural language, it's really hard to get like exact numbers. So it just depends on what, but with like structured data, you can. So there are things you can tweak on, like how you want to evaluate the response coming back from the agent.
Okay, let me check I've understood that. So if I am writing my agent that deals with version control, if I give it a prompt like, okay, commit that, I'm expecting it to invoke the status function, right?
Yes.
And the commit function. So I can write tests for that.
Yes.
Then I'm expecting it to come back with a new hash. And I write my test case as it should emit a new hash or something.
Yeah, so basically you say, I'm gonna get a hash, but you probably want to have it a very low rating. So you don't want to compare that, because every commit will be different. So this one, you will probably just look at the tool trajectory, seeing if it's calling the right tools. But for a night owl examples, right? Like, am I getting the right recommendation? So that's something that you probably don't want to, you can look at the tool trajectory, but that's not important. The important is the response that you're getting back. So depending on what you want the agent to do, you can kind of adjust the numbers you want to see, like how you want to evaluate your agent's work.
Okay. So I might write a test case that had a response that had a table with like time of day and activity headers. How are you comparing those? Because it seems like you need another LLM to be able to compare those natural language.
So natural language,
the test case with react response.
The test is, so the response is mostly natural language, by the way. It's not a table or something like that. Like the table is probably not a good case for this type of things, because like the way that we expect the LLM will respond back is natural language, right?
I'm too used to asking my LLMs to give me markdown as a response.
Well, markdown,
that's why I say that.
Well, the markdown is also like there's our language, natural language. So basically, it's an algorithm that we call, it's a mathematical algorithm that we call to look at the actual summarization intent. So basically, you're using that algorithm to do that. So you're actually not using a specific model to do that. You can, and they are actually like static rubrics that you can introduce in this kind of things. I'm not sure. I actually haven't done it before. I'm mostly using Rouge because it's like the out-of-box one. It's easier, and I'm just checking the response. But I think you can actually introduce different rubrics in order to kind of figure out if they are similar. Like in your case, if you want to do like specific comparison between the two tables, you can probably do that. But in most cases, Rouges will be good enough to kind of check the response similarities between the expected result and your actual result.
Right, and you say this test passes if it's 80% similar or higher?
Yeah, sometimes I do 20% because sometimes I want it to be very creative. So for the test for the night out plan, I want it to be 20% because I want it to come back with different results every single time, with different times and stuff like that. So it depends.
Right. Okay. This feels a bit fuzzy for my personal taste in unit testing, but I see why, and I'm glad there's something to test.
But for tooling trajectory, you want to make sure it's 100% the same, right? So I would say,
so it should always call git status.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a mix of options. What's that like in practice? I mean, are you testing when you run the test suite? Is it trying to run 5 or 10 cases in parallel?
So there are two options in ADK. You can run it as a single test. So this is like a single session, like a quick request and response type of test cases that you can build, or you can use an eval set. We call it evaluation set, where you can just have a set of request and response and toolings that's called. So it's like a multi conversational interactions where you can do, and it will have multiple agents being called. It will go through that whole thing. So it contains a whole history. So normally what I do is I will just do a one that I expected all the right answers, extract those information out. It will be my evaluation case, or you can use synthetic data. So sometimes I'll use like a model to generate that synthetic data for me. So it will follow all the rules. So I can check it. I can have this evaluation set kind of compared to a output and just do that kind of test. So there are two different things. You can do that with unit test case, and another one's for like the integration test.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Okay, so I've reached the point where I can check that it's working the way I expect. I've defined it. What does deployment look like in this?
So
how do I productionize it?
Deployment is very similar to your traditional microservices. I think this is where all the platform engineers were like, nothing is easy. So basically, it's a Python application, basically, right? So just wrap it around as a Python app, and then deploy that onto any your preferred environment. If you want to do it in your VM, if you want to do it in your Kubernetes, just wrap it around as a Docker image, whatever, just deploy that on top of it. The only thing is you probably want to have access to the LLMs. So LLM deployment is a separate concern. It's a separate topic. That's a huge topic that you want to talk about. So how do I deploy my LLMs? Do I want to have it as a vendor hosted LLMs, or do I want to host my LLMs? And should I run it on the VLMs? And how do I fine tune my VLMs? It's a whole separate story. But agent deployment agent is very simple. It's how you would normally deploy a Python app, is how you would normally deploy an agent. Another difference,
because it is just Python code in the end, right? Apart from the LLM,
100%. Another thing you probably want to think about is memory management. So an agent is very different from a HTTP server. So when you think about a request and response, it's crisp, it's easy, it's simple. But when you have an agent, it's a multi-turn conversation. So the sessions,
yes, it's stateful,
exactly.
Right?
So it's so the check histories and all that kind of stuff needs to stay somewhere, right? So all these informations needs to be stored. So how are they going to be stored? It's part of a component that came with ADK. Is you can define how would I manage my sessions, right? When should I terminate my sessions? And should I store them temporarily in memories, or should I store them outside of my memory? So when my application, my agent hosting images died or my runtime died, I can still retrieve it. So there are certain options you can have. You can have them stored in a different database or different file storage, or you can store that in our Vertex platform, right? So you can do that. Other than that, they are, I know like recently, like people talks about context engineering, people talks about context, right? You want to provide extra context for your agents. Things like policies, like security policies. These are important things. These things shouldn't even be answered by the LLMs. Things are, you can actually put in extra.
I want to get into that too.
Yeah, so things you want to put in as an extra information for your LLMs, you need to actually put those in the as a context. So how do you store them, and how do you retrieve them when they're needed? So all these are a separate place to store. So when you deploy to production, you want to think about all this, components that goes with that. So do you want to spin up a separate storage, separate database, or a separate instances to hold these memories.
Right, yeah. Because I'm going to want to store people's prompts in something like Postgres or something, BigQuery, I guess I should say in your case.
Yeah, or sometimes you want to store them. Right now, like the most popular one is probably one of the reg use cases where I just want to retrieve like the histories of our, because we might have a very long conversation history for like the past 1 year. I only want to retrieve the ones that's relevant. So I'm just going to retrieve the ones that are relevant and put it as my context. So
Yeah.
the one they implemented in Vertex is that they would do those kind of search. So they call it memory, like agent memory bank. They will just retrieve the related information back to your agent. So there are different things that's implemented inside the whole agent system kit, the development kit. Sorry.
Right, yeah. Specifically on the, there's probably a term for this and I don't know it, but the kind of safety guardrails thing. Like, I write an agent that does customer support, but I want to make sure that it never ever says you can have one for free. How do I write that kind of guardrail?
So there are many different safety aspects, like in terms of like agents, like we can talk about all day. Like there are things that you want to have access to it. You want to make sure there's no harmful information that comes out. You want to make sure that it's been checked, like it's not giving you free stuff, right? Like all these information guardrail that needs to be put. There's different things. So for your use case, it's like not getting like a free stuff. You probably want to have that as part of your policies that is defined in your agent. So that could be part of your context. So whenever this agent is called, it will be built in. So it will be part of the rule that gets sent into the LLM. So the LLM will take in that as a part of the rules of how it should behave, and it will come back with that. So that's one way of doing that.
But am I defining that as part of the system prompt, or is it separate?
It could be part of a system prompt, but it could be dynamically retrieved, but also as part of the system prompt as well. So there's a fixed system prompt and there's a dynamic system prompt you can kind of add into it. So depends on where you are. But yes, a system prompt would be a good place to put it.
So this is woven into the thing the user asks,
Exactly,
rather than as a kind of post-processing step.
I would say that because it's a rule, right? So I would probably just build that in instead of like having it as an afterthought. I think that would be easier in terms of like I don't have to process every single one of them, and it's just easier for people to maintain in the future as well. So it's right there when you see it. So yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go on.
But also in terms of security, there are different things. Like they are LLM security as well. So think the harmful things you don't want to actually get into the LLMs. They are model, in Google we call it model armor. So it goes a protection layer. So it will just block every malicious call. Even before it actually get into the model, it will just block it. So they have a little algorithm aside model that kind of protects it on the side. So it's a separate process. So it's going to cost you. So your malicious attack won't cost you anything because it's been blocked. There are different things like security-wise. There are different things like MCP calls that you want to make sure that some of the unauthorized agent cannot get access to your MCP server. So there are different things you want to set up for kind of authenticate and authorize your MCP servers. And when your agents try to talk to another agent, you want to make sure that they are authorized to talk to each other. So there are things you want to implement in front to make sure that they are there. So you can do that with OAuth right now, with ADK and all that kind of stuff.
If I wanted, that raises an important question for something I'm working on the side at the moment. If I'm happy with my LLM and my interface to it and my prompt and all that stuff, if I just wanted to build MCP tools with ADK and not take the whole package, can I do that?
So ADK doesn't build MCP, integrates with MCP. So you build your MCP server and just integrate with it.
Oh, I thought I could define tools.
You can define tools, but the actual underlying MCP is still coming from the MCP libraries. We do have a wrapper to wrap around it for it to integrate with ADKs.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And so I'm slowly building up all the pieces in my mind. One thing you mentioned that we haven't really talked about is RAG, right? give me an embedding for the conversation we've had so far, go to a database and find similar documents.
Yes.
That's a fair summary of RAG.
100%.
Why you haven't mentioned where RAG fits in this, does it?
I would say RAG is a part of the tools. I think it's called Agentic RAG now, that people use RAG as part of the way to retrieve data. It's just being built in
So
as
it's no
part
longer
of.
separate.
It's not a separate thing. It's a way of retrieving your data. It's similar to using a SQL to retrieve your data, but in this case, it's using vector, right? So it's vector embeddings. Very similar things. The way that you would query a database will be very similar to how you do a RAG.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense because the MCP protocol would support that. So why have two protocols?
Exactly.
Which reminds me of another thing I needed to ask you. Why have two protocols? Google are coming up with a different protocol that isn't MCP. So tell me about that.
I know you bring this up. So
Yeah.
MCP, A2A, what are the difference? I would say, I would think about it as different directions. MCP is a vertical directional interfaces where it's how agent talk to the tools, right? Because for tools,
Okay.
they are certain things you have to make sure it provides a specific tooling names. It will have to assemble all the parameters for it to execute. So these are all the essential things for MCP server to run. So that's a specific protocol for an agent to actually to get things executed in the MCP server side to get the tooling executed, right? So that's that. But what happens if you have multiple agents? So it's a horizontal line where you're having agents trying to talk to a different agent. That's when you want to use that protocol. So it's agent to agent protocol instead of agent to tooling protocol. So I would think of it as different that way.
Right, yeah. So having got to this point where agents are calling tools, we're now into the world of sub-agents, and that needs its own protocol.
Yes, because I might have a ordering agents where I need to talk to a payment agent and then a logistic agent. So these are things, and they all can belong to different companies, and they all talk in natural languages. Sometimes they take in different modalities. Sometimes all that kind of stuff. So you just want to make sure these are all part of the built-in protocols, and because agents are mostly in natural languages. So you want to make sure you get capturing all that and send it to the other agents.
Yeah, okay. Naively, that seems to me like it could just be, I'll send the sub-agent some text, it will send me some text back. Like, off the top of my head, that protocol doesn't need to be more than text file, back and forth.
It's not just that.
What am I missing?
You gotta have the histories, like your chatting histories, and you also wanna. Sometimes we have different files, so voice files, image files, video files are all part of it. And also, on top of that, you also have the securities. And how does the agent discover each other? So there's mechanisms like agent card. Agent card is very similar to how you and I would exchange things in the past. If I will give you my business card, this is what I do, and this is my address, this is how you find me. Similar to that. So agent will provide an agent card to the other agents, and the other agent can look at your card and say, do I need you or do I not need you? And these are all the things you can do. I might ask you to do things for me. So that's very similar to that.
Agents going to cocktail parties saying, what business function do you provide?
Exactly. That's probably it.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Okay. Then I have used sub-agents and Claude, right?
Yes.
But they're all local to one machine. Are you also providing like networking? Does ADK let me distribute sub-agents over different physical machines?
So ADK has all the sub-agents in a single instances. Like so they have something called root agent that is kind of the core coordinators for all the sub-agents. So every root agent will have multiple sub-agents underneath the hood, right? So they can do that. And you can also have multiple agents talking to each other in different instances. That's what they call a remote agent. So you can call them as a remote agent. So you can integrate remote agents. So this remote agent can be your sub-agent. So you can assign them as a sub-agent as well. So there are different things you can do that as well. So you can have your own. The easiest way I would do is don't overcomplicate it yourself. You can have your sub-agents in your local instances, but you can also have your sub-agent as a remote agent running in a different instance.
Okay, yeah. You've made me see it's now a matter of time before someone builds an actor model framework that has this all built in.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. It's still early.
Yeah, I can see that coming.
But I definitely can
One
see
framework to rule them all.
I think there will be like a repository for the agent in the future. I don't think we see it yet because now we have like MCP server repository, MCP servers, but I think there's going to be an agent repository somewhere. I'm just going to, figure out which agent I want to interact with in the future.
Yeah, I can totally see that for all the things we would have deployed a REST API for every time. Now we'll be deploying agent APIs for all the time. Yeah, I think that'd be a fun future. Okay, then how do I get started on it? What would I do if I wanted to go and build something with ADK?
So just go to our ADK, just Google Agent Development Kit, and you'll find all the information there. So depending on what kind of languages you prefer, there are different getting started pages where you can get started with. Or you can just use Gemini COI is one of our coding tools that is heavily integrated with ADK. So if you want to, vibe code your agent there, I think it will be your most safe bet because it has all the documents pre-pulled into that will generate the right syntax for you.
Yeah, of course it does. And if I wanted to use this to build something like my own Gemini that was specialized to Rust, I don't know. That seems like a fun example. Would that be feasible? Do you think?
I think so.
Is that a good hobby project?
I think so, but I haven't dug into that too much yet. So.
Okay. What have you done? What are you building with it? Maybe that's the last question.
I did a fun project so I've been touring around the country right now. We are kind of getting people up to speed on what is ADK. So we built this super cool RPG related RPG theme